Welcome back to the Girl Out of Order podcast. We have such a special guest today, and it's a unique guest, unlike anybody we've had on this show so far. And I promise you, you are going to be so happy that you dialed in today because whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening to us on any platform, if you have ever struggled with not only time management and productivity, but the mindset around it, you are going to love our guest today. Her name is Alexis Haselberger. She is a time management and productivity coach. She helps people do more with less stress. In fact, that's all of her socials are do more, less stress. She does it through coaching and workshops and online courses. She has such a fascinating background of how she got to this point. This is a woman who I think I'd like to say wasn't born with the time management silver spoon in her mouth. She's neurodivergent and struggles with ADHD. And I wouldn't say struggles, lives with ADHD, and yet has become so beautifully systematized, if that's the word. I'm not even sure if I conjugated that right, and has really reached out to help people close the gap between what they want and how they get there. She's pragmatic, she's fun, and she approaches this topic with helping people easily integrate practical, realistic strategies. She doesn't overwhelm them with complex systems. She breaks it down, gets underneath the hood of why people do or don't do certain things in their lives. She has taught thousands of individuals to take control of their time. Her and clients, listen to this, they include Google, Lyft, Workday, Capital Work, Upwork, and more. She is a delight, and you are going to be so riveted, as I was, by the intelligent and the dedicated Alexis Haselberger. Welcome to the Girl Out of Order podcast, Alexis Haselberger.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to have you on. I am enjoying so much shifting my podcast from being really pretty much solo episodes to having like these amazing guests. And as I told you right before we started recording, I'm just excited to bring people on who are doing their own damn thing in their own unique way. And I find you to be so intriguing.
Oh, I love that because I definitely think of myself as someone who does my own damn thing in my own damn way. And I want more people to do exactly that because, like, who is this life for but each one of us?
Right? Exactly. So before we dive into all the things that you are doing, I just want our community to get to know Alexis Haselberger, the woman. Like, who is this woman? Whatever you want us to know about your story, but just help us get a flavor of you as a person before we dive into what your mission is in the world.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to take this in a kind of personal direction then, but
Excellent.
feel like I have always been someone who really had a kind of high ROI for my own time. Like I have been someone who always wanted to live by my own rules in terms of like, how do I spend my time? What does that mean? I mean, even from when I was a little kid, or maybe like a high schooler, I was always making deals with teachers.
Okay, wait a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm cracking up because making deals with teachers, you're going to tell us what that means, right?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay. All right. I'll shut up.
Okay. So like a couple, one of them was, I went to this school where we had to be in either band, orchestra, or choir. And let's just say that like me and practicing music did not go well together. Like it was not something I was interested. I didn't care. It was boring. I didn't want to do it. And so I was in band. And so eventually like I started out playing the flute. It was terrible. Then,
did we talk about this?
No, I don't think so.
Because I did too.
Did you?
Hated it.
Absolutely hated it. I was so bad. Then I was like, you know what? I'll switch to percussion. I'll play the bass drum. Easier. Then I was like, you know what? How about just the triangle? Then I was like, great. Then I was like, cymbals. I'll do cymbals. That's easy. It's just like 2 things per song. And then finally I was like, went to my teacher. I was like, you know what? Let's just do this. I am a detriment to your band class, but I have to be here and you have to teach me. So how about I just don't come to class? I will write 3 papers this year about music or music history. You will grade those papers and that will be my grade.
Okay. Is this a real thing or are you making this up?
Oh no, I totally did this.
Why are
He
you
said,
not a
okay.
lawyer? Like, that's a total lawyer thing to do. That's what I do. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I want her working for me.
So yeah, I did stuff like that. I mean, in college, I did something similar. Like, you remember you'd have those classes in college where it'd be like, it's not the lecture class, it's like the recitation after that the TA is teaching or whatever. And I hated those. And so I would always go to the TA and I'd be like, look, I know you're going to give a quiz at the end of it. So how about you give the quiz at the beginning? Anyone who gets 90% or above can just leave.
Did that work?
Yeah. Because they didn't believe me that like, they were like, fine, sure. If you can get 90% without like listening to me talk about it, sure. And so I would just take the quiz and then leave. So I was just like always making these, like, this was always part of who I was. Like, I'm just like, how can I spend more of my time doing the things that I want to be doing?
You are cracking me up. When we had our whatever podcast guest talk, you didn't tell me you were this sneaky.
Well, I don't know. To me, it didn't feel sneaky. It was just like, what can I mean, I always feel like, look, people can always say no, right? Doesn't mean I'm not going to ask. Like,
fair.
So it would have been, I'm sure there were teachers that said no. It's just, I remember the ones that said yes, right?
Exactly.
So anyways, like, that's kind of the way that I approach life is like, I have a lot of things I have a lot of things I like to enjoy doing. I have a lot of like specific ways I like to spend my time. And so like, how can I, it was always important to me to get good grades and to like, in the work world, it was always important to me to like do really well, but not at the expense of like having a personal life or my own time and doing things that I wanted. And I didn't want to be bored and I didn't want to like do busy work and stuff like that. And so that's kind of where I come from in terms of like who I am as a person from one perspective.
My goodness, I am cracking up. So you have always had I would say, maybe it's not a conscious relationship with time. Maybe it's a subconscious relationship, but you've always seems like you've been engaging with time.
Yeah, I think so, right? It's like everything looks like in retrospect, it all makes sense, right? But it's like going forward, no, it's just like, no, I just don't want to do this thing. And so like, how can I get myself out of doing this thing? I also learned, much later that I have ADHD. And so I think there was also a significant component that was like, when there were things that I like wasn't as good at, I would try to figure out, how do I get this done in a different way? Like, how can I still get straight A's, but without doing this thing? Or, in the work world, like, how can I continue to progress, but I don't want to sit there doing this boring, busy work. So like, let me figure out a way to automate this, or like, let me figure out a way to delegate this or whatever, so that I could be enjoying more of my time, I guess is the way that I would put it.
I love that. I love that. So did you take this, I'm not going to even try to say, I'm going to call it a superpower. Did you parlay that superpower into a career before what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I worked for like the first 15 years of my career. I worked in early stage startups doing basically all of the things that aren't sales and engineering.
Got it.
HR, I had roles like director of HR, director of operations. It didn't start out like that. It started out as like an office manager, right? But like I had these kind of operational roles where I was doing like legal, finance, HR, like all of those things that aren't sales and engineering. And in really fast-paced environments where people are kind of like burning out left and right, working all the time. And like one thing I knew is that I definitely didn't want to work all the time. Like I wanted to do really well in these environments, but I didn't want to be at the office after dinner.
Right. Oh, you're talking to an attorney. Like that's like foreign. Like it's like built into the DNA of the legal profession that you work ungodly hours, but that's not it's not healthy. It doesn't lead to a fulfilling life at all.
No, I mean, I would say like, I have never met an attorney who would tell somebody else to become one.
Dude, I haven't either. Sorry to call you dude, but seriously, dude, honestly, I've been licensed attorney since 1997. I'm not doing the math for you. Yeah. And there are very few attorneys that would tell somebody else to go in this profession. That can change. It has to change because the world, sorry guys, the world does need attorneys. Maybe not as many as we have, but we are a necessary profession. But we're burned out. We're exhausted. We're miserable. We're angry. Our relationships are breaking down. We have addictions. And I'm not saying me, by the way, I want to make that very clear. I don't have all those things, but I have a lot of them. And it's unsatisfying. I don't think it's the profession that's unsatisfying. It's how we're doing it.
Yes. Yes, I think so, right? I mean, I think that's why so many attorneys that I know like decided to go in-house and out of kind of firms, right? Because
Hmm.
they know they're going to make a little less money, but they're also not going to have to they're not going to have a part-time 50-hour a week job,
Oh,
right?
preach. Because I don't, you must know this about me, or maybe you didn't. I went back to, so I was a stay at home mom for 10 years, and that had
Yeah.
its own unbelievable challenges. But I went back to work part time, 3 days a week. Do you know how many hours a
Yeah.
week I was working for like $38,000 a year?
Yes, right?
It was madness. And it was
Yes,
like, it was either that or I'd lose my law license because the
right.
amount of pressure and details was unsustainable.
Yeah, I totally,
And
right?
I didn't have an Alexis. Let me make that
And
clear.
I
Didn't have
work
one of
with a
her.
lot I work with a lot of attorneys, right? Because it is a profession where it's just like I mean, every profession, but like lawyers in particular, it's like it will just eat you, right? It will take everything you have to give. And there's always more work to do. And also
Mhm.
billable hours, right? Like when you're on a billable hours based thing, like it affects the money, right?
It does. Yeah. I don't work. I mean, we're going to Hawaii next week. We're leaving on the 23rd and come back on the 6th. And I like have heart palpitations because
Hmm.
I work or I don't get paid.
Yeah,
And the amount of pressure that that causes in a human being, because I have a family to feed, I have college to pay
right.
for, I have bills to pay. It's intense, and so time management, it's critical. And I, like right now, between now and where you and I are talking, and when I'm leaving,
Yeah.
I'm like, like it's a very pressured field. I didn't mean to make
Yeah.
this about me. I'm sorry. I
That's
took it
okay.
in a
No.
totally different direction. But okay, let's go back to you.
Okay.
You're in this. Would you call it something early stage startup?
Yeah, early stage start. So I'm in San Francisco. There's a lot
Oh,
of
enough
like
said. Okay.
that's the kind of tech company, small tech companies, like getting off the ground, services, professional services firms. Like, I spent a lot of time in those companies. I spent a fair amount of time as like an outsourced HR person at a company
Mhm.
that did like, basically we did HR for other companies. So
Yes.
I worked with a lot of startup founders and, on all sorts of things. And I was just kind of immersed in this world of people who really driven to do really big things, and so
Mm.
often that was at the expense of their time and their hours and their health and their exercise and their sleep. And I knew that like that I didn't want, right? I
Mm.
I did want to succeed, and I didn't want to do it in that way that I've seen. Kind of like when you're saying like, yeah, like being a lawyer is interesting, but the
Mhm.
way we do it is it's like a killer, It's
Yeah.
really,
And sometimes it's
it,
like a silent killer. It's like
yeah, it
you're
takes a
literally
lot.
just putting you're just doing the necessary steps, but you're crumbling and you don't even realize it. It's like a slow erosion a lot of times. Sometimes it's an implosion, but
Yeah.
more often than not, don't you think it's a slow erosion of
Mhm.
your mental health, your physical
Right.
health, your emotional health, even your
Yeah.
spiritual health? You
Yep.
wake up one day and go, I look in the mirror and like, I don't know who the F I'm looking at. I lost
Yeah.
her. Where did she go? And I do a lot of identity work, like in my personal development journey
Mhm.
personally, and identity mastermind that I run in my podcast, like helping women reclaim their true identity. And it doesn't happen overnight that you lose it.
Right. It's like all of a sudden, yeah, I totally agree. It's a very gradual thing. I always say that like the profile of people that I work with typically is like a really successful person who has gotten there by brute force and is now looking around and like,
Mhm.
wait, okay, like I'm here. I want to stay here, but I don't want to do it this way anymore. Like I can't, in fact, I can't do it this way anymore. Like looking ahead, thinking I got 20 more years until I can retire. I cannot do it this way,
I
you
love
know?
what you just said. You have such a beautiful way with words. I remember that from when we first talked. Who has gotten there by brute force? Like you don't pull any punches. Like
Yeah.
you just call it like you see it.
Yeah.
And that brute force, and don't you think too that that brute force or just sheer will, it's okay maybe in your 20s, maybe your
Yeah.
early 30s, but when you're at the office and you're missing your kid's soccer game or their
Yeah.
performance or their parent teacher conference, you get to the point, whether it's kids or not, I mean, it
Yeah.
happens to all people. As we get older, we march through life, we go, no, like it's no longer sustainable because then it starts to take a toll.
Right. And I think what happens too is exactly like you said, there's part of that was instructive in getting people to the success that they had. And
Yes.
so then it's like you get to a point where that's really all you know. And so you start to believe that the way you like your success is because of the way you do things instead of despite the way you do things. And it
Ooh.
shifts. It shifts.
When did you shift when you knew you didn't no longer wanted to be in that hard charging environment and you made a shift, you made a pivot somewhere in your career? Because obviously you're doing something different, really radically different.
Yeah, so I would say that like for me, I like even in my career, I was I had pretty strong boundaries. And because I was kind of focused on this ROI of time, like people saw that I remember I had a boss once who said, Alexis can get done in 20 hours what any other person can get done in 60 hours. And
And
I
that can
did
be a
like
compliment or maybe not,
yeah,
depends.
maybe not, right?
Yeah.
It depends, but it's like in retrospect, I'm like, oh, ADHD hyperfocus helps with that. But
I need a little more of that, girl. Can you like hand that over to me? Like slide it on
but
over?
exactly. But it was also that like I was always trying to figure out like how can I what are the essential parts, right? Like how can I do the things that really matter in the most efficient way that I can so
Mhm.
that I have time for other things. And so I started like I remember when my youngest or my oldest was going to kindergarten, like I was like, you know what? I want to be there to pick him up from school. And so I started like a couple years before that, I started talking to my boss, negotiating like, I want to start working a 30-hour work week. And like, what does that look like? Right. Or a couple years after that, I was like, you know what? My kids need to be driven around to a lot of different places. I need to work from home. Like, I need to work from home. How do I negotiate that? So I was kind of, and I would often put things in, I know I'm getting to your question
No,
also,
I'm
but
I'm riveted, honestly. I'm just absolutely riveted. I'm like,
um,
"Ooh, tell me more."
but yeah, so I was kind of I was thinking ahead of like what do I want and how do I approach it in a way that I can say like let's try this as an experiment. And because I know it's going to work, but you need to be convinced, right? And so it's going to be hard for me to convince you without actually showing you. So let's be like let's try it. I'm going to go let's do for 3 months I'm going to do 30 hours a week and I will take, my 25% pay cut or whatever, but let's just see does this work? Right? Does this work?
Mhm.
And it did. Right. And then I was like, let's work from home. And this was like way pre pandemic. So everyone was like, this was the time when nobody worked from home. Right.
Right.
And they were like, I don't know how this is going to work. And I was like, look, I'll come in for big meetings if we got a big client meeting or whatever. But like, I just want my main thing to be working from home. Let's try it for the summer. And if it doesn't work, we can go back to the old way. And so I think that experimentation and kind of approaching things in this way is something that that has helped. And then eventually, I worked for the same CEO at a couple of startups over like a 10-year period, and I built up a lot of autonomy and trust and
Mhm.
respect, et cetera. And when we shut it down, as many startups that happens, just like 90% of startups go out of business, right? But when we decided to shut that one down, I realized like, oh my God, I don't want to go out there and like prove myself to somebody else. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to be back in that position where I'm trying to like regain this sense of autonomy that I had really valued.
Right.
And so I decided I would start a business. Like, I don't know. It's
You're
one of those
so
things in
funny.
retrospect, you're like, yeah, I'll do the easier thing, start a business. Obviously, that's not the easier thing in any way.
No.
But it is much more fulfilling. And so
Yeah.
I'm doing people had started to come to me for productivity, time management, et cetera stuff. And I thought, this is a real gap that I could serve because nobody teaches this stuff. Nobody teaches it in high school. Nobody teaches it in college.
Mm-mm.
Some people are naturally good at it. I don't know that I was naturally good at it. I just think I had a lot of, um, I, I had a lot of willingness to experiment to find things that worked for me.
Mhm.
And I probably had to get good with systems earlier because I have a very poor working memory.
Mhm.
And because I have some challenges in those cases. So it's like I got really good at task management systems because I didn't have an option not to, right? And a lot of people like we just do things in our head. And a lot of people can keep a lot of things in their head for a
Mhm.
long time. And then eventually it doesn't work anymore. And then they don't have the skills to figure out what to do differently.
You've said so many amazing things, and I just want to highlight a couple if I can.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the first thing that really stood out to me, and I'm doing the lawyer thing, taking notes because it's what I do. You figured out what your outcome was. That is first things first. And this is what I'm working on in my life. And I like I said, I need an Alexis in my life because I've got a lot of projects going and I have ADHD too. And I don't know how to allocate my time and be intentional and figure it out. But one of the things I'm working on and I know is going to be the key to success, and I say this for all of you listening, know your outcome and then you work your way back. What Alexis said there was so beautiful. And I wanted to highlight this because I have all four of my daughters have some form of ADHD as well. And so oftentimes what I see in them and in myself is we almost look at it as an excuse or a crutch, or, well, I guess this is just the way I am. And we don't set higher goals because we tell ourselves the bullshit lie that we don't have what it takes to get there. And so what I love about you, and one of the things I was so excited to bring you on the show is, sisters, if you're listening, this woman isn't standing here like some time guru who was born with this silver time spoon in her mouth. Sorry, totally weird analogy, but just go with it. This is a woman who has a disability. This is a woman who is differently abled and has decided what her outcome was, because whether you have ADHD or whether you don't, or you have something else, you still have the ability to decide what your outcome is and then work your way backwards to create systems. Like she said, I created systems because I had to, not necessarily because you wanted to, right?
No, I mean, I look at my husband who just am I allowed to say a swear word?
I have already said bullshit, I think, at least twice. So right. Go ahead, go for it.
Right. I'm like, I look at my husband and he just like gets shit done and he doesn't have any systems. He doesn't, like, his email to me looks insane, but like he's more on top of things. You know, it's like, I don't know how he does it. And I wish he could do it. I wish I could do it that way, but I can't. And so that's fine. I still can get all the things I need to get done. I can still have a lot of time for myself. I just had to figure out different ways to make it happen.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's why I really like working with people on this stuff, because all of our brains are different. It doesn't matter what's going on, whether you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, whether you've got other situations, how much is on your plate objectively or not. Like, we all have different ways that we need to experiment with to find the solutions that work for us as individuals. And so many people will like read getting things done and be like, well, it doesn't work for me. Like, I must be like there must be something wrong with me. And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that like what worked for this guy doesn't work for you. There will be something that works for you. We just have to find it.
Oh, I love that so much. Ladies, if you're listening, listen. I want you to hear this, because so often when we are neurodivergent, or I don't know the difference between neurodivergent and neurotypical, maybe you can flush it out, but whatever your challenges are, whatever they are, and Tony Robbins often says this, if you try something, it doesn't work, you try something else. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't work, you try something else. I just said this to my child the other day, my 19-year-old, and I said, and guess what happens if that doesn't work? She's like, try something else. Absolutely. Because in life, you're growing or you're dying. There's nothing in between. Like, you're either growing or you're dying. There's no like stasis. You don't just like stay in one place. And so a growth mindset means that we continue to try until we find the optimum solution for our circumstances.
Right. And things might change again, and that's okay. Right? Yes. It's like your circumstances might change. What's going on for you might change. Something that worked before might stop working. But that's okay too. Right?
I love that. And I had an interview recently with a gal who is like amazing with perimenopause and menopause. And so that's a really good example of like brain fog is a real deal. We shouldn't discount it, but we also shouldn't use it as an excuse to stop trying to tweak and change and grow and evolve, which is what you are so beautifully gifted at.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like, I don't want to feel like I don't have autonomy over my own life. Right. Mm-hmm. And if I were to sit here and say, well, I have this challenge, and so I guess I can't do it. Like, what does that do for me? Like, that's not fun. That's like, it's minimizing.
It causes women, I mean, humans in general. I work primarily with women, but it causes us to further shrink. And
Yeah.
we as women don't need any more reasons to shrink back because it's already hard enough in the corporate world. And I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And trust me, as a stay-at-home mom, it's probably the smallest I've ever felt. Not because I
Yeah.
was comparing myself to working women.
Yeah.
It's because I couldn't function in the home as well as other stay-at-home moms who
Mm.
didn't have ADHD, which was undiagnosed in me. I had no idea why I couldn't fold the laundry, clean the kitchen, make meals, plan meals. And so I
Yeah.
would just cry and read the paper. Like that's,
Yeah.
but you give people tools. Tell us a little bit about you've evolved. Okay, so I keep popping into your story and taking us because
Yeah.
I told you I was going to do that. But I wanted you to tell people like we're getting to the point where you're saying, okay, I'm finding this part-time. Now I'm finding this work
Yeah.
from home situation. When did you sort of shift to being like, wait, I love what you said. I even wrote down, I realized there was a gap I could fill. That's
Yeah.
gorgeous. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so I actually have to credit that boss I mentioned that like I worked for 10 years at two different companies. He at one point said to me, "Hey, do you think you could do a productivity workshop for the team? Just based on stuff you already do and that stuff that like systems you've implemented here." And I said, "Oh my God, yeah, that sounds like so much fun." Like my first thought was like, "Yeah, oh my God, yes, I would love to. Best assignment ever, right?" And like that just I was like, "Huh, interesting," right? Because like you just kind of go around, you're like, I'm doing the stuff that works for me and like whatever. But people started coming to me for that. And, I had implemented task systems at a few of the different businesses that I'd worked with. And I'd helped other people learn how to offload the mental load and like keep stuff in there and keep stuff updated. And so when that last startup went out of business, I decided, you know what, like it's so just like I just don't want to go work for somebody else. Like I have a
Mhm.
passion in this area. I think it's like, it's something that people are seeing in me, but it's also something that's important to me. And it's something that like I could go down the rabbit hole on because like I think it's really interesting. And also, I want more people to know, I was going to say believe, but no, to know that you do not have to sacrifice in every area of your life for work or otherwise. Like I'm not here to judge what people do with their time, but I know so many people who just don't feel like they're using their time in the way they want to, and they
Mm.
don't know how to do it any other way. It feels like things are happening to them and they're just kind of going along and they're not kind of in the driver's seat, to use a very cliche metaphor. And so I think that's the moment where I was like, oh, let me just see if I could help other people not feel so darn stressed all the time, right?
Mm.
People say they want to have hobbies and they want to work out and they want to, whatever. I do those things. I've learned how to figure that stuff out. I bet I could figure out how to help other people figure that stuff out. But also, it's interesting. Sometimes I have clients who, they have very different goals than me, right? And so I remember I had an attorney client and she said, "Look, I work 80 hours a week. I actually really like that. I don't want to change that. What I want to do is be more efficient in my work time." And I said, "Great, let's do that," right? Because it's not my role to judge what you want to do with your time. It's just my role to help you get there.
I love that. So you started your own business, which
Mhm.
sounds like the least stressful option.
I know, right?
Having
Yeah.
started my own law firm in
Yeah.
2020 in the middle of a pandemic, I can attest that starting your own business is not for the faint of heart.
No. No, it's not. I mean, it's like probably it's one of those things about like anyone who starts their own business probably has to have like unbridled optimism, right? Otherwise, you would never do it.
Or the ability to completely disconnect from the potential reality. I mean, it's going to
Right.
be fine. We'll figure
Right.
it out.
Right. And I'll also say, I mean, there's a fair amount of privilege in there too. That like my husband had a job,
Yes,
and
you're
like
right.
worst case scenario, like I had that leeway to be like, okay, I can take 6 months to figure out if I can make this work, right? And that's what I told
Right.
myself. I'm like, I'm going to take 6 months after this startup ends. I'm going to take 6 months, and I'm just going to see, can I earn revenue from this skill set in this time? I wasn't like, oh, I have to get to a certain number. I wasn't like, it's just like, can I like, do people want this, right? Like, is there a product market fit here?
Mhm.
Because if I find a few people that want this, there are definitely going to be more people that want this. And then I know it's like I've kind of proven out the concept and I can go from there. So So that's what I did.
I love that. And I love that you acknowledge that because, we know that not everybody listening has the freedom to just stop something and start another thing. But I will say, as I'm sitting here before you, we're recording a podcast on a Friday and I'm not running my law firm, but I'm still running my law firm full time. So sisters, if you have a dream that wakes you up at night, if you have a dream of creating a business or a mission or a nonprofit or a stream of income, sometimes you got to work 9 to 5 and 5 to 9. And it's not easy and it's not forever. But Alexis is sitting here before you as somebody who, yeah, maybe she had a little, I know. Do you see that?
I know that happens to me too, and I hate it.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you're watching this on YouTube, you totally know what we're talking about. If not, you're like, what just happened? Was there a glitch? No, there's not a glitch. If anybody can message me and tell me how to get these goofy like thumbs up, fireworks, things that go off, please let me know. Anyway, it was actually good timing, but I'm going to stop putting my thumbs up and put my hands down. Now that was an ADHD moment, but we're back. But no, seriously though, just because she might have had time because she had a spouse to help fill in the gaps doesn't get you off the hook from chasing your dream, because you can do it if it's your outcome, figuring out your outcome, and then you work your way back. Okay. I just wanted to highlight that because that was important.
Yeah. Can I add something on to that too?
100%. Go.
I also think too that I think we often think like, well, if I'm going to do something, I have to do it. I have to like really I've got to work every night until midnight to make it happen or whatever, if that's the case. And I think it's like, we can have a slower path to the thing that we want. That's okay. Right. Like, let's say that you're in a position where you work a 9 to 5, you have a busy life, and maybe you can only devote 5 hours a week to a side project. Devote 5 hours a week. See what happens, right?
And schedule it, which is what I'm struggle so much with, Alexis. I'm coming to you just honestly, honest. Like, I talk about it. I agree with it.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, I really do struggle.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. And what I would say too is that, one, it is hard. So it's not like I'm sitting here saying like, hey, this stuff is just so easy. Just do it. And like, you'll never, you just do it. No, like, there's practices that I do and that I do because if I don't do them, things will go off the rails. But it's not like I enjoy every minute of those things. Like, my most hated thing that I do every single day, but I still do it every day, is that I need to transfer my written notes into my task system if there are actionable items there. And I know people are saying, well, why don't you just do it at the time? Or like, why don't you use an electronic form of note taking? I've tried all those things and they don't really work for me. I am a paper note taker. It's just how it is. I use an electronic task system and I have a paper note taking system. But what I know is that if I don't transfer those notes in, if I don't make sure to be like, oh yes, I said I would do this thing, and like what I get it in there, then I will forget. And then I will not make good on my, on my promises to people. And then that will not be good for me or my business or anything else. Plus I'll feel really stressed. I don't like doing this at all. I hate doing this, but it takes 10 minutes. And I know that if I do it today, I'm going to feel so much better tomorrow. And I just have to remind myself, like, what will tomorrow Alexis want me to have done? Right. I think that that's like just accepting the fact that it's okay if it's hard. Like, it is okay. And then tweaking until something works for you. So for me, it's like I have a task system where I keep everything. And then I use that to kind of map it into my time. So I say like, okay, here are the things that I want to do. Does that actually fit in the time I have available? Because if it doesn't fit in the time I have available, I'm going to be stressed and I'm going to feel bad.
Okay, that's so powerful. So then I have a question for you on that.
Yeah.
How do you accurately estimate how long certain tasks take? Because that, sister, is the single biggest reason why I don't schedule things, because I'm somebody who hates to fail. I used to I literally stopped playing the flute because wasn't the best. I don't like the golf because I'm not good at it. So when it comes to task planning, what happens a lot of times is I will put it in, but I do not accurately know how long something will take. And so I can't stick to it.
Yeah.
It creates its own form of stress. And so I just say, why bother? Which is not healthy either. So help a sister out, because there's no way I'm the only person thinking this right now.
No, you're not. And I'll just say, human beings, terrible at time estimation. Like, we are not good at this.
How do we get better?
So I actually have an article about this, about like 4 ways. I'll send it
Oh,
to you
good.
afterwards.
Please do so
But
I can
let's
put it in the
talk
show
about it
notes.
now
Yeah,
for the
let's
listeners,
flush
right?
this out. Flush it out.
Yeah. So I'm going to send that to you afterwards. But one of the things I think that you can do is, or what I found is that most people are bad at estimating time, but most people have a pretty consistent off ratio. So here's what I mean by this. Every time I think something is going to take an hour, it takes me an hour and a half. I still think that things are going to take a certain amount of time. I'll still be like, yeah, I think it's going to take an hour, but I know that I'm wrong, right? And so I know that I'm kind of a 1.5xer. And so I'm like, how long do I think this is going to take? Oh, I think it'll take an hour. I'm going to block an hour and a half for it. I worked with people who are like 3xers, right? It's like everything they think is going to take 10 minutes takes 30 minutes. And so it's actually just about applying the math. and you can find out what your kind of ratio is if you spend just a few days where you start a task. You don't have to have scheduled anything. Just you start a task and you make a prediction just on a piece of paper. How long is this going to take me? You make a prediction and then you look at the time, and then when you're done with the task, you just write down how long it actually did take you. If you could put this in a spreadsheet so it'll do the math for you, but if you do that for a few days, you will find that you have a pretty consistent off ratio that you will then be able to apply going forward.
Off ratio. I've never heard that phrase, but that makes so much sense. Tony Robbins always says what gets measured gets managed. And I always augment that to say that what doesn't get measured dies. And so for me, my will to schedule dies because I don't measure it. I never thought about like even doing a short audit, because someone like, oh, audit for a week. Well, when you tell someone with ADHD who has a job like mine, which is litigation, so it's different every day, to spend a whole week auditing their time, I like, but you're right. You could do it in a day or two. And I bet you there's a theme. I bet you there's a golden cord, as we call it, that runs right through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and another thing too is that like when we get distracted, it can also be that like, hey, we blocked this time, but then things happen. We got distracted from it. That also messes with our estimations, right? And so you can address that in a couple of ways. You can address that by using timers to help you to stay focused on a particular task and like shutting down other windows and making sure you don't have notifications and stuff up. Right?
Too close, Alexis. Too close.
Okay, sorry. Are you feeling
sacred cow?
So there's one way to do it there. There's, so you can think about what types of things distract you. There's also just like building buffer into your schedule. Like if all this seems like too much math and too much whatever, then be thinking about, okay, let's see, maybe plan for like 6 hours of work in your day, knowing that it's going to take you 8,
That's about accurate. Yeah.
Accept the fact that it's going to take longer and don't plan out every single minute of every day. I did also want to address, you'd mentioned this not wanting to fail, right?
Yeah.
And this is so common. And it is so common, especially around like planning and scheduling, that people feel like, well, if I made this plan and then I didn't stick to it perfectly, I have failed, right? And I actually want to shift our thinking around that. Okay. Because I think of a plan as like a backstop, right? So it's like, if I have made a plan and my plan is realistic, right, to the time that I have available, and something else comes in, right? And that thing is more important, more urgent, whatever, than the things that I have planned for, then I should rightfully change my plan. If I don't change my plan, what am I doing if I'm not taking in new information, right? If something takes me longer, that's the reality of what happened. So I can shift my plan. I can move something to later. And now I have additional data for the next time, right? But I think what happens is that, we think, well, why should I bother planning if it's just going to go, what's the point, right? And I think the point is that if we don't have a plan, it's so easy to just let the day happen to you, right? It's just like emails come in, stuff comes in. We don't know what, it's like we kind of have a high level sense of priority, but the urgency wins out. And so we don't actually have anything to compare it to. We don't have any like way to prioritize the incoming to what already exists.
Yes.
And so I don't think of shifting a plan as a failure at all. I think of it as appropriately intaking new information into the plan.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I had a visual. I'm super
Yeah.
metaphorical. It's just the way my brain
Yeah.
works. Have you ever been in a wave pool at like a water
Yeah.
park? Okay, so at first it's kind of fun, right? It's like, oh, this
Yeah.
is so great. And then after a while, it's like you're holding on for dear life, right? You
Yeah.
got your fingers like dug into the float, and then some kid comes by who's
Yeah.
falling off his float. You're trying to save him, and then pretty soon you're under the wave. I'm not even joking. That's like how I feel with my scheduling. And I love what you just said. It's like, it's what we can control is right here in between our
Mhm.
ears. And so it's like shifting your mindset and talking instead of thinking about your day like being in this crazy ass wave pool, which
Yeah.
again, there are going to be days like that, but it doesn't have to be the norm. Is
Right.
shifting it and saying you create a backstop, you create a
Yeah.
framework, and then you
Yeah.
you dance within that framework because life happens. Like I have kids
Yeah.
too. We have teenagers. We were talking about that before the show started.
Yeah.
We have sick kids. Like I had a child having a really big struggle at school yesterday.
Yeah.
And she calls me, do I need to go and get her? No, I don't, because she can drive home. But do I need to take a beat because now I'm worried? I just
Yeah.
lost 15, 20 minutes because I'm concerned and now I can't concentrate. So it's like, it's about self-love and
Yeah.
self-compassion. And I know all these things, Alexis.
Yeah.
Can you help somebody like me who knows what to do,
Yeah.
but every week she
Yes.
struggles to implement what she knows?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about exactly as you said, self-compassion,
Mm.
and it's about iteration. And so
Ooh.
it's saying like, what did I learn this week that can inform how I might do things differently next week, right? Did I give myself too much to do this week and
Mm.
that's why I'm feeling like this? Did things take longer than I had imagined? Did I fail to, all right, not use the word fail, but like, did I not think about a certain type of work that needs to happen that like screwed with my plan? Like a good example of this, right, is when people try scheduling and time blocking and then they're like, it just never works. I never stick to it. Like I don't know what the point is, like blah, blah, blah. There's often reasons for this, right? And like one of those is typically that we've scheduled in specific work,
Mm.
but we haven't accounted for the other stuff that we know is going to happen. We're just not thinking about it, like email, right? Email is not just this layer of work that somehow is going to magically get done between all the other things.
Mhm.
It's actually its own work. And so if we're putting things on our schedule, we need to actually account for that. Also, we need to eat, right? Like we need to go to the bathroom. So you're not going to like schedule in your bathroom breaks, but you want to be like, look, if I look at the calendar and let's say I want to work 8 hours tomorrow
Mhm.
and I look at the calendar and I have 3 hours of meetings, it's a fallacy for me to think I have 5 hours of work time that I can get like deep work done
Mm.
because I probably have an hour and a half worth of like email and communications and things like that. I probably have, and at least another half an hour of that is going to be accounted for like having lunch and going to the bathroom and, doing all of those other things. Maybe I need to even include a little bit of buffer in there for the unexpected things that I don't know will happen yet. I know that unexpected things will happen, but I don't know what they are going to be. So I might build some time in for that. And so I think what happens is when we try to schedule, it's like we're not really accounting for everything. And therefore, we don't stick to it because other reality is happening that we're just not recognizing, if that makes sense. So I want to share another example of planning that might be more concrete and help you and the listeners to see why we shouldn't feel so bad when things change, right? And so I like to think of this as like a meal plan, right? A lot of people will make a meal plan for the week of like, what are you going to cook for dinner, right? And I think of this as, look, if I have planned that we're going to have chicken and broccoli on Thursday, but then we get invited out to dinner, I don't feel bad about that. I just go out to dinner with my friends and move chicken and broccoli to Friday, right? Like the plan is there so that I don't have to open the refrigerator at 5 p.m. and say, oh my God, what are we having for dinner? Right? Like the
Mm.
plan is
Are you in
there.
my home? That's what this scares me. Like it's like you're in my home. You have cameras in here.
People say that a lot. But I
Oh
promise I'm not
no.
spying on anyone. But it's like, we don't feel bad about that, right? That's a plan. And we changed the plan and we don't feel bad about it because there's new information that came in that changed the plan. So why do we feel so bad about it when we change the plan related to work?
I love what you said. I'm going to quote you back because I want to make sure that this wasn't missed in your really fun example,
Yeah.
because everybody I know has stood at the grocery store, or the not the grocery store,
Perfect.
the refrigerator. But you said, we change the plan when new information enters in, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I butchered it, but and I think that's where I've become so hard on myself,
Yeah.
Alexis, especially as a litigator, because
Yeah.
being a legal litigator, especially in family law,
Yeah.
holy smokes, it's like whack-a-mole. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's whack-a-mole from 8 a.m. Monday to 5 p.m. Friday. And when you struggle with time management, and I'm
Mhm.
just true confessions, like it's not easy. Rolling with the whack-a-mole can be such a source of stress.
Yeah.
And I am just committing to you and to my audience here
Yeah.
that I am going to take a totally different mindset approach to scheduling,
Yeah.
because it's really about, and I even do this in my parenting agreements,
Yeah.
where they say, well, what can we do it differently? I'm like, the parenting agreement is only there if you cannot agree with your ex-spouse on how
Yeah.
to parent, parenting time, decision making.
Right.
It's there as a backstop. But it's so interesting that I've never made that connection with time blocking, time scheduling, all of
Right.
that, because I'm very much a rule follower. So if you
Mhm.
tell me that I've got to follow these rules and I don't follow the rules and I can't follow the rules, I give up.
Yeah.
And that's not like me in most other areas. Why is that so typical in time management?
I don't it's so I don't know why it is, right? Like I wish I had the answer to that question because so many of us feel so bad about like this is just something that comes up in every client engagement that I have that people
Mm,
feel bad about changing a plan. And I think like not only is the plan helpful because you can say, "Oh, is this new information that's coming in? Should it change the plan?" But also, if you don't have a plan, that new information, you don't have anything to compare it to. So you might, it's just, oh,
mm.
here's a squeaky wheel, they're here. And maybe that has nothing to do with your goals for that day or whatever, but it showed up. So you're doing it because you don't have anything to compare it to. And so the plan just helps you much more easily say, yep, this thing needs to move because this incoming thing is more important. Or it gives you the confidence to push back on something because you know that everything else you'd planned for today was actually more important than this thing that is coming in right now.
Ooh, ooh, that's so good. That's so good. When you said, because you don't have anything else to compare it to, I was like, oh, the conviction. And it got me thinking. I wrote down here, because you had talked a few paragraphs ago, if you will, about reviewing when you're trying to figure out your off ratio, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah.
And so, from a practical standpoint, just giving our listeners some, like,
Mhm.
hey, takeaways, like what are some things they can start doing
Yeah.
today without eating the whole
Yep,
elephant? I hate that phrase, but it
yep.
works every time. Without eating the entire animal in one bite. Like,
Mhm.
what are some things they can do today? And I keep going back to this review piece. So, from a practical standpoint, what do you do, or what do you help your clients do in order to, I would say, do a time audit? I don't know
Yeah.
what you call it.
Yeah, I mean, we do so I have all of my clients, do when we work together, like, one of the first things we do is a time audit, and I just call it, like, time tracking. We just do it for a week, not forever, right? I am not one of
Mhm.
those people that's like, "Hey, you need to do this for" like, we're just trying to do lowest effort, but highest amount of information, right? So we're just trying to get some information. And so I will just and I have many ways to do this, right? There are free apps that you could use to do it. There's one called Toggle. I also have a spreadsheet I use with my clients, or sometimes people just like need to write it in the notes app of their phone, and that's fine, right? We do what works. What's the easiest thing? And so I'm not suggesting that everyone should time track all the time, but it can be really helpful to just see like, what's happening for me? Like, what the questions that I like to ask are like, what are you surprised by when you look at this? What are you surprised by? What
Mm.
do you feel like, wow, I'm not doing nearly enough of blank? Where are you like, whoa, I am spending way more time than I thought on something else? A lot of times people say, well, it's so hard for me to time track because I'm just switching between things all of the time. And I say, that in itself is valuable data, right? That's okay
Too
if we're
close
not.
again. Too close again.
Exactly, right. And so people can time track, but I think like for practical things that I would suggest right away, I probably
Mhm.
wouldn't suggest like just starting with time tracking. I would say use a task system of some like get the stuff out of your brain because our brains
Mm.
are not for this is something David Allen says and in getting things done, but I really resonate with this. It's like our brains are for having ideas, not for holding ideas, right? And
Ooh.
so when we have just like all of this mental clutter, right? This overload, all these things that keep coming back around to us, it's very hard to focus on anything because our mind is trying to help us not forget all the things, but that's interfering with our ability to actually do the things, right? So I think
Mhm.
just even if it's paper or like I have my favorite task app is called TickTick, TickTick, not to be confused with
Hmm.
TikTok, but
No.
it's free, it's great, it's like platform agnostic, works everywhere, but also use paper if you like paper, right? But just get it out of your head. And then make it just for tomorrow. Look at your schedule tomorrow. Look at your task list. Look at what you've written down and just say like what fits in there? Of these things that I need to
Mhm.
do that are important, what actually fits in the time I have available tomorrow? And
Mm.
make a realistic plan for yourself. Just start there. And the reason that I think this is really important is because I have this concept I call task realism, right? Which is, I'll
Mm.
describe it like this. If you have time to do 5 things tomorrow, we're just going to simplify, right? If you have time to do 5 things tomorrow, is it better to have 5 things on your list and get those 5 things done, or to have 10 things on your list and get 5 of them done, right? Even if it's the same
Mm.
5. Because in the first scenario, you feel great. And in the second scenario, you feel really crappy. But the outcome is the same. You did 5 things. So, what do you want to do? Do you want to feel good or do you want to feel bad?
Yeah. Where do you put the other 5?
They go later. Like, yeah, because
Okay.
the
That's
reality
my
is,
fear. If I don't write them down, I'm going to forget.
right, you have to write them down. You have to write them down because if you don't, you will forget them, right? And so this is not like, we're having a conversation here. I can't, like when I work with someone, we're going deeper into like how do we integrate all of these things over time. But I think this
Sure.
is one simple thing that we can do. And I think that when we start to use a task app, it's something that allows us to put things in time. Right. So we're able to say, these are the things that are going to happen tomorrow. And yes, there are 500 other things that I need to do, but they're not happening tomorrow. And so I don't need to look at them until the next time I'm planning, right? And,
Yes.
for me, it's like I do a quarterly planning process where I look ahead and I say, like, what are my big rocks? What are my big goals? And then I
Mhm.
look at my task system and like, what are the tasks in here that are related to these goals that I have, right? And then I'm putting them in time and I'm saying, like, you know what? I don't know exactly if I'm going to do this thing on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. in 5 weeks or whatever, but I'm saying, like, I don't actually need to think about this for 5 weeks. So I'm going to put it 5 weeks later. And when 5 weeks later comes, I'm going to plan for the week ahead and I'm going to see what's here and I'm going to granular kind of do it in granularity. Because there are all
Mm.
sorts of things, right? It's like I have things on my task list, like renew my passport 1 year before it expires. That's not for like 7 years, but I don't want to have to think, oh, I have to renew my passport. When do I have to renew my passport? I don't want that thought to be coming up, you know,
Mhm.
75 times over the next 7 years or more. Right. And so if I
Mhm.
use a system that's not my brain, that's external, I can store that stuff there and have a lot more mental energy for actually doing the things.
It's so funny. You say it's the little stuff, and sometimes even as you're talking about passport, I start to get like nervous. I'm like, what about all the things I'm forgetting?
Yeah.
But it's about 2 millimeter shifts, about the small
Yep.
hinges that swing big doors, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the good, and it's so funny because as I'm saying this, I'm realizing I didn't do this the other day. Ugh, woman, I'll get this figured out. Showing myself grace,
Yeah.
but it's like when I get my hair cut, I
Yeah.
make this an appointment for 6 weeks out.
Yes.
Then and I've fallen off of that. I've
Hmm.
like resisted it, and it creates more stress. And then
Yes.
the dentist is calling you, and then your hair's too long, and your gal's not available, or
Right.
whatever the case may be. It's about clearing out space
Yes.
in our beautiful brains so we can. I love what you said. Our mind is for having ideas, not holding ideas. I was like, what? Like that to me, I'm just like, I can't let this go because I'm going to forget it. But you're right. It's like if you get a system where those ideas are captured,
Yeah.
you don't have to hold on to it,
Right.
and then you are freed up to breathe, to flex, to pivot, and to
Mhm.
create.
Right. And to know that like your brain can let go of that stuff. You don't have to be running the mental to-do list while you're trying to fall asleep. You don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. going, oh, I didn't send that email. Like whatever those things are, if we can externalize that stuff, we can actually see it, make decisions about it, prioritize around it. And I think a really hard thing for a lot of people, myself included, is reckoning with the fact that we're not actually going to do all the things.
Yeah. Amazing. We're never going to have an empty inbox. It's just
No.
not going to. And if it does, then your life's going to be pretty freaking boring.
Boring. Exactly. That is what I
Like
say.
really boring and unfulfilling.
Yes. Oh my God. I say
So,
this all the time, right? Which is that, like, look,
yeah.
if we were able to accomplish everything we wanted to every single day, we would have nothing to strive for, nothing to look
Mm-mm.
forward to, for no direction. That wouldn't be an interesting life.
It wouldn't be an interesting life. That is so freaking true. All right. So as we come to a close, my friend, my new friend, I'm so fascinated by. Can you tell? I have a million questions, and we never have enough time. But I mean, with the time that we have left,
Yeah.
what is on your heart still that you just want people to know, not only about what you do, because I want at the
Yeah.
end you to tell us all the
Yeah.
places we can find you, because I was telling you before we started, I'm sort of stalked she has a podcast, by the way. It will be in our show notes. All the things will be in the show notes. But what do you want people to know, especially women? What do you want women to know about time management and about the gift that time truly is?
Yeah. I mean, what I want people to know is that, like, you can be a little more selfish about your time. Like,
Mm.
you can make decisions about your time that are for you and
Mm.
that are not just beholden to everybody else and everybody else's needs and everybody else's wants. And that's an important part, right? Like, I love my family. I love doing things for them. I love my clients. I love, being beholden to that. But also, like, if you get to the end of your life and you look back and you think, well, there's all this stuff that I wanted to do and I just didn't make the time for it, because we say to ourselves, well, I'll do that if I find time, if I happen to have time. You won't. You
Mm.
won't find time. Like, that doesn't happen. We're
Mm.
not just getting handed time. Like, we have to make that time. And it's hard because that means we have to make trade-offs.
Ooh, oh, that's such a beautiful place to wrap it up. It means we have to make trade offs. And it goes back to what we were just saying.
Mhm.
When you choose your outcome, then the trade offs become not only palatable,
Yeah.
but enticing.
Yeah.
Because if it's
Yes.
not aligned with your purpose and it's not aligned with your outcome,
Mhm.
you can bless it and let it go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I always say I help people learn to use their time in a way that supports their goals and values, whatever those are.
I love that. Well, tell our listeners where they can find you. And then I have one closing question for
Okay,
you.
perfect. So, best place is my website that will get you to all the things. It's alexishaselberger.com, which you'll put in the show notes because no one will be able to spell it.
No, I
Uh,
got you, girl.
and then, you can find me on most of the socials at Do More Stress Less. On Instagram, for some reason, it's do.more.stress.less, but everywhere else, it's Do More Stress Less. The podcast is Do More Stress Less. It's mostly Do More Stress Less.
I love that. And I just adore you and your message. You are just so easy to talk to. We could go on for another hour, but that's just, I think it breaks a rule. I'm not sure. Okay. So as we close, I have one final question I ask all my guests,
Yeah.
and I shamelessly ripped it off from Jen Hatmaker, one of my favorite podcasters. And I love when she asked this question. I've tried to do it my own way, but it's just too perfect to
Yeah.
mess with. So, and you can answer it however you want. You can be funny, quippy, spiritual, soulful, whatever. What, Alexis Haselberger, is saving your life right now?
Oh my God, pottery. I am like totally
Oh,
obsessed. I started, I joined a pottery studio in September of last year. It had been something that I had been, had been on my list of like things I want to do that I wasn't making time for. And well, we didn't get into this at all, but I had breast cancer a couple of years ago and I'm
mm,
okay now. But one of the things that came out of that was like, when you're faced with your own mortality, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do the pottery. And so that's what I'm going to do after this. I probably spend like 10 to 15 hours a week there now. And I spend a lot of time outside of time in my business and with my family throwing pottery on the pottery wheel. And I love it.
oh my gosh. And what I want you to hear as our way out here is she scheduled the time for it. And because she has this backstop of a plan, she's able to do the thing that lights her up. Thank you so much, Alexis. I
Thank you.
appreciate everything.
Ah, thank you so much. It's been such a fun conversation. It's an honor to be on the show.
Oh my goodness. This conversation with Alexis was amazing. We stayed on after our conversation and just kept talking because We are so similar in how our brains work, and yet she has learned so many more strategies than I have ever heard. So if you are so inspired, and I would imagine you are, even if it's not applicable for you, if somebody you love struggles with time management and productivity, wants to do more with less stress, have them follow Alexis Haselberger. I will put all of the things in the show notes. But what I want you to hear is you are meant to live your best life. And to do that, we need to honor this gift of time. The one thing every single human being has in common is we all have the same 24 hours in a day. Imagine what your life will be like and the impact you can make if you learn to manage your time well, to make every minute work for you and your mission. The world will be such a better place. Thank you for tuning in today. Please share this podcast wherever you listen with any friends, family, coworkers. Take a picture of this podcast and share it on your socials. We need your help to get this message out. So, in the meantime, keep being a girl out of order because, sister, truly the world needs what only you can provide. Have a beautiful week.